welcome to My Favorite Person, the #1 rated podcast about the manufactured housing industry in South Carolina. In fact, the only podcast about the manufactured housing industry in South Carolina. Well, today's episode is going to be a bit different. As opposed to having a guest here, we're going to actually go down through some of the association's legislative priorities for 2024. Well, we have here a document that I'm looking at that has a rundown of all of our upcoming legislative priorities, the association's goals for the coming year. It looks like we've got a lot of cool things in the works.
Yeah, one thing that's important is we have that Energy Star tax formula where there's no sales tax on Energy Star homes. And when that was passed, it was passed with a 5-year limit on it. So we have to go in every 5 years and get that renewed.
Absolutely. I think hopefully it serves our industry really well.
That has caused some confusion because a lot of the state agencies saw where it was going to be ended 5 years ago, and they did not know what a great association we were, that we would go in and extend that for 5 more years. So people would go in with their Energy Star homes expecting to pay zero sales tax. They say, no, it's more than that. So that's one of our projects this year is you go in, you talk to the leaders of the Senate Finance and House Ways and Means, the tax writing committees. We'll ask them to extend that zero sales tax formula for Energy Star homes for either 5, 10, 15 years, whatever we can talk them into.
See, there seems to be a pretty large update going on with the Manufactured Housing Board with the laws and regulations. I don't know much about that. I know that you and Shell, it seems like you are always talking about going to a task force meeting on this, reaching out to members, experts. Could you give me a sort of loop me in on that?
As a matter of fact, the legislature has said that all the agencies need to update their regulations every 5 years. And we see that as an opportunity. I mean, there are some things, the regulations need to be cleaned up, they need to be rewritten, but also it's a chance to upgrade the industry and improve the industry, to do some things that help our companies do business more cost effectively. And of course, that's good for the customer as well. A great example is there's a regulation right now that says that every manufactured home dealer must use the same purchase agreement, the same contract, word for word. And that has not worked well. So what the task force is recommending is we just list all the things that need to be in the contract, and then each company can do their own form. So that's just, no other industry that I'm aware of has a form that's published by the government. So that's going to be a big step forward. Some of this stuff, you might call it inside the beltway, unless you're actually in the industry. Good example, there's a South Carolina law that says every dealership must have an authorized official, every dealership. But it doesn't say what authorized officials do. You just have to have one. And so that kind of leaves you feeling a little with your feet not quite on the ground because you don't know what your obligations are. So we're writing some wording and suggesting that would basically say an authorized official is the contact person between the agency and the dealership. So what's happening is there a task force. It's a joint agency industry task force. The leaders of the South Carolina Manufactured Housing Board, some board members, and then people from MHISC are working together. And it's just a great way. At the federal level, what usually happens is HUD or some federal agency, the consumer lending agency, the bureaucrats get together, they write up this stuff, and then they send it out and you can comment, but once it's carved in stone. So this is a good system, and my hat's off to the folks over at LLR, at the Manufactured Housing Board, because they've said, well, let's work together. Let's get input from the industry. Another one right now, if anybody who's tried to open a new dealership in the last couple of years has had a challenge because the law says that the dealership must provide a CPA reviewed financial statement. CPA reviewed means that CPA goes through it, verifies information, and so forth. The problem is virtually no CPA does that kind of work. And I think some of it is big picture things that the general public can identify with. One thing the association is very keen on is keeping bad apples out of the industry. If you have a criminal background and certain types of financial crime, if you lost your license in North Carolina and try to come down to South Carolina and get a manufactured housing license, there needs to be a system. So what we want to do is sort of tighten up that system, ask a lot more questions on the applications. So, I mean, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the customer. It's not good for the guys who have to compete with somebody who comes in that doesn't play by the rules. Another thing on the modular side is display models. If you're displaying a home at your retail center or your sales center, usually you might keep it there 5 years, 6 years, whatever. The building code changes. And so we have a law that says as long as it's within 5 years of manufacture, then you can sell that home to the public. You just notify them, here's when it was built, here's the code it was built to. And as we look at that, this has been on the books a few years. We said, well, why do we need this 5-year thing? What's the 5-year limit? Because think about it. If you live in a site-built house and it was built in 1930 or 1950 or 1970, they don't update the building code each time somebody moves in. So each time you sell a modular home, there's no reason to do that. You know, the home was built exactly to the standards that were in effect at that time. And so that's something we can do. We can sell those display models and save the customer some money. And by just tweaking the law just a little bit, we'll also be able to do that more often and also have bigger, nicer display centers.
Right.
If you go up to, say, North Carolina, where the law is different, they've got, walkways and garages and all these really cool hard landscaping type things. And the end result will be nice, well done, impressive home displays in South Carolina. And of course, that's good for the industry and it's good for sales for that company.
Right. If the display center doesn't have to worry about tearing out a display home every 5 years or so, they can get more permanent with laying down brick foundation, doing landscaping, porches, that kind of stuff.
Shel Suber is a part of our governmental affairs team. He knows the players, he knows the system. So what's decided by our board, all these positions were decided by our board of directors, our modular steering committee, and our dealer roundtable. They make the policy decisions, and then the team here puts together the legislation. We go over, we get sponsors, Shell walks it through. So that's the system. It's a lot is involved, but it's certainly worth the effort.
This is going to be the first time that we have officially announced this to the general membership, and that is our manufactured housing replacement bill. Would you like to give me a rundown of that? This is something I think everyone can appreciate.
Yeah, in a lot of areas, way back in the 60s and 70s, before the current staff was here, a lot of cities and some counties basically banned manufactured homes. And so what you had was somebody owned a manufactured home, but they were in this area, and some cities would not let them replace that home. Some would, some wouldn't. So what you've got is some of these homes that are, quite old. The person who owns the land says, well, I'd like to update that. I don't want to move, but I would like to put a nicer home into on this property. But sometimes the law says you can't do that. So this legislation, we stole the idea from the state of Georgia. They passed it a year or so ago, and basically says that any manufactured home anywhere in the state can be replaced with a new manufactured home. And so if the local rules always already say, yeah, you can replace manufactured homes, or you can replace them if they're 10 years old or whatever, that stays in place. But this says that if there's no leeway for manufactured home, you can always bring in a new manufactured home.
All right, the last thing I believe we have on the list here is one that I know has been plaguing industry members, at least recently, probably for a while, and that is our electric access bill.
To really do a full-scale test of that home, the HVAC, all the systems, you need to have it hooked up to the local utility and have power. And so what we ask for is sometimes called temporary power. While the installer is putting that home together and testing it, let us be hooked up to the power company. And this is done for site-built homes. It's not done for manufactured homes in some counties. What we're asking for is the ability to have power. As we put the house together, we test it, and then the resident, the owner, will then go in and get his permit.
Well, there's one major looming thing that I'm sure is out on everyone's minds that we have not talked about that is happening in 2024, and that is license renewals and continuing education. Obviously, something that affects pretty well every single person who I think will be listening to this podcast. Are they doing anything differently this time with how they're doing license renewals?
Yeah, people need to be aware of this. Last time, you just checked off on your license application. Did you get your CE hours? And they would check yes. And then they went back and did a partial audit. I think 20% of the people who got a license were audited. And they found a good percentage of those guys had not actually done their CE. They just checked yes. And so it's got to be different this year. I mean, I think the agency has been forced to do it this way. Now, in order to apply to renew your license, you have to have evidence that you took your 6 hours of continuing education. You will attach that to your license renewal application. But the cool thing is, and you, Clayton, really, and Andrea and our staff played a huge role in this in terms of putting together a user-friendly system where somebody can just go on the MHISC website, download all their CE hours, and just attach it to the system.
Well, this is great. We're going to continue the Tuesday after this one, with some normal interviews with members. I'm looking forward to seeing who we recruit for that one.
Bye, y'all.